Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew Jorgensen, and I'm the General Director of Opera Theater of St. Louis. It was a pleasure to be with you last week to celebrate the opening of our 2020 festival season and the production of Carmen that we had planned, and I am delighted to welcome you tonight for Die Fledermaus. As you may know, this was the first festival season for which I was part of the planning from the get-go. And I just love operetta. As I listened to the beautiful music as we waited for tonight's presentation to begin, my heart gets racing. I was so grateful to our artistic director, my colleague James Robinson, for enthusiastically running with our request for a comedy and for an operetta. Jim, I know you're watching tonight from your home in Southern California. Thank you for planning such a fun and fantastic production, and I'm so glad we can share it with everyone tonight. I know that our wonderful board chairman, Noemi Nydorf, joined us online last week, and I continue to be so grateful to Noemi and to our entire board of directors for their support during this time of uncertainty. I'm also extremely grateful to Opera Theater's many donors. This evening in particular, I'd like to acknowledge the Burgess Family Foundation for their leadership gift for Die Fledermaus, and thank you also to Dr. Mabel L. Perkerson for her support. After the cancellation of the season, these donors allowed us to allocate their gifts to make possible the payments to our 2020 artists and artisans. Thank you also to the donors who have made this new online spotlight series possible, including PNC Arts Alive and Steve Trampy and Jenny Gupta. Our conversation with tonight's artists will be approximately 1 hour, and then we'll answer a few of your audience questions. You know, part of the fun of an online event like this one is seeing questions and comments from audience members pop up during the conversation. So please comment early and often. We'd love to hear from you. You can type your questions into the chat bar below your screen. And if for some reason you don't see that chat bar, you may need to hit escape from the full screen mode. Tonight's program relies on technology, and occasionally technology doesn't cooperate in just the way that we would hope. If you have any problems with the broadcast, try hitting the refresh button on your browser. Often solves many problems. And now on with the program. Tonight we're going to start with a little bit of music. This evening we start with music from an exciting young tenor, Joshua Blue, a former member of our Jardine Young Artist Program, and now a member of the K-Fritz Young Artist Program at the Washington National Opera. He is launching a brilliant career, having already made important debuts at Carnegie Hall, the National Symphony Orchestra, and even abroad at the Seiji Ozawa Festival in Japan. He was set to return to Opera Theater this season to show off his comic chops in Fledermaus in the role of Alfred. In this excerpt, which he recorded from his quarantine at home in Washington, Alfred is serenading Rosalinda from outside her window, an idea that Josh enthusiastically applied from his kitchen. Please enjoy. Thank you. Our first guest is an American theater and opera director, originally from Houston and now based in New York City. After completing degrees in theater and Italian at University of Texas, Austin, she spent 5 years living, working, and studying in Russia at the distinguished Boris Shukin Theater Institute in Moscow. She has worked at major opera houses including Santa Fe, Houston, San Francisco, Chicago, Hanover, and even the Bolshoi. Die Fledermaus was to be her directorial debut with opera theater. Shawna Lucey, welcome. Also this evening, our conductor of Die Fledermaus, who was originally from North Carolina. His interest in conducting began at age 14, and along the way, he studied with conducting greats, including Leonard Bernstein and Nadia Boulanger. He has worked with a wide array of distinguished artists, ranging from Dame Judi Dench and Josh Groban to Deanna Damrau and Bryn Terfel, in projects ranging from musical theater to the BBC proms to television specials and opera. In recent years, he made debuts at Cincinnati Opera, Lyric Opera of Kansas City, Opera Philadelphia, the English National Opera, and in February, he was appointed music director of the Philadelphia Pops. This season would have been his opera theater debut. Welcome, David Charles Abell. So first of all, hello to both of you. And just quickly, where are you? And quickly, how are you doing tonight? David, where are you tonight? David, are you there? Oh, David, we can't hear you. While we sort that out, why don't we ask? Now we hear you. Great, David. Welcome. Where are you?
All right, good. Yeah, I was going to say I'm at my home in London, and it's a bit later here. It is 1:07 a.m., but I'm very happy to stay up with you all.
Thank you for staying up late. Maybe that's why we couldn't hear you at first, because the sound had to travel all the way from London to here to St. Louis. Shawna, where are you tonight?
Hi, good evening. I am speaking to you from New York City. I'm in my apartment.
Well, thank you for being with us tonight. First question to David. David, sometimes we make a really big deal about distinctions between different musical styles. But as a conductor, you have flourished in the world of musical theater, opera standards, new operatic works. How do you navigate those different terrains? What do they have in common, and where does operetta fit in?
Well, for me, it's really all the same job. My passion is musical storytelling, and whether I'm conducting Les Miserables or La Bohème or Porgy and Bess, I'm telling a story with music, with singers, with actors. And I think if you understand that, you can conduct both opera and operetta and musical theater successfully.
Absolutely. To drill into that, do you work with singers any differently across those genres, or is it just the same thing? How do you think differently about the artists?
Well, every artist has a different process, and some singers like to work more technically, like should I do a diminuendo on this note or a crescendo? And others like to work more like actors, like what am I thinking? What's my attitude towards the other character? What emotion's going on? And both approaches are very valid, and I like to work in both ways. I think my favorite is probably to work with them as actors, though.
That's interesting. Say one more word about that. Why?
Well, having lived in London for a long time, there's such a great tradition here of theater, you know, all the way from Shakespeare down to the present day. And there's a great respect for the actor's process here. I'm saying process because that's how they pronounce it here. And, you know, when you're in the rehearsal room, you're always engaging with the actors as to where they are in the story, who they are, where they've been, their backstory, as it were, and their motivation. And that excites me very much in a musical context, because I believe that that's where the composers of these great works started. They wanted to tell stories and talk about characters.
That's a great answer and a perfect transition to Shawna. Shawna, the same question for you. You direct in a lot of different styles. Do you think differently about operetta or opera or musical theater?
I, like David, have the same kind of attitude towards the work, which is the acting intention has to be totally tied to the music. So if we think about the intentions coming from the music, then you're going to make right acting choices and right musical choices. And then you're going to either get the real depth of emotion that you need for a very serious piece, or you're going to really drill down and nail that comedy the way you want to.
But thinking about opera, operetta, that's just marketing copy for you. It's all directing. It's all the same gig. Is that right?
I approach every piece, regardless of if it is a tragedy or a comedy, looking for as much comedy as possible, I would say. Just
well,
kidding.
I want to talk about, but I do want to talk about comedy just a bit later on. But Shawna, staying with you and speaking of comedy, your concept for the time and place of this production of Die Fledermaus was really clever and going to be such fun. I think you brought some slides with you, and I wonder if you can tell us and show us a bit of what it was that we might have seen on our stage tonight.
With pleasure. So as we, opera fans know, the Strauss Overture is such a fabulous piece of music. So fun. You just want to move and dance. So we had planned in the overture to see our gentleman returning from a party with Falca dressed in his costume as Batman, drunk in the subway of New York. So because we're doing it in English, we decided, me and Robert Innes Hopkins, the designer, we're going to set it in New York. And in fact, they're going to be they live in the suburbs, but they come into the city for these parties. And in thinking about the essence of the piece, about kind of sexual liaisons, of infidelity, of dalliances, I thought of the kind of precursor to the sexual revolution in the United States. And in fact, 1959 was the year that the first Playboy Bunny Club was founded in New York City. So all of that brought us to this idea of here we are, we've got these fun costumes, we see the boys, they're drunk, they get caught by the morning commuters, they're quite embarrassed. And if we go to the next slide, what we see is our Act 1 kitchen. So here we have the Eisensteins at home. They're living that perfect Americana life in the suburbs. What more could they want? Except he's off to jail for a few days, which makes perfect timing for her to have her dalliance with her boyfriend. And lots of singing and dancing, of course, in this very fun 1959 kitchen. And if we go to the next slide, what we see is that the kitchen turns around and becomes Arlovsky's club. So the boys have headed over to Greenwich Village to this famous Russian immigrants party, and we've got gals in champagne glasses and dancing on the bars and little Sputnik kind of chandeliers, only to be discovered, by his wife also dressed in a fabulous costume. And we could indeed go to the next slide, in which I think we're going to see some costumes. So here is Rosalinda coming to the party, dressed up as Catwoman, continuing our theme. And I forgot to mention, of course, one of the pleasures of doing Fledermaus is that you have the opportunity to rewrite the dialogues. So we came up with the idea that the party is actually Halloween. So that's how we get some people in fancy dress, some people in superhero costumes, and all the more reason why people can act out of turn, cross lines they wouldn't normally, pretend to be Hungarian. And then we could go to the next slide and see some of the more elegant looks. Arlovsky, of course, played by a female singer, but playing a man. We have this great kind of in between. He looks so fabulous, and the ladies are wearing gorgeous gowns, but with masks. And we get that sense of downtown naughtiness of the, late 50s, early 60s in New York. And in our Act 3, which is our next slide, of course, how could we not end up in jail after having so much champagne? Here we have kind of a fun and yet typical New York City precinct. Most importantly, at the charge desk, one can hop up there and sing and dance. I'm sure that's pretty typical in usual precincts, much like in our production here. So those are some of our design elements that we were, very excited to work with the singers on creating really vibrant and physically challenging and fun, bright comedy to tell this kind of fun and naughty tale.
What a delight to see all of that. And what a fun and irreverent take on Fledermaus. I think when you first described it to me and Jim Robinson, you said, this is the marvelous Mrs. Maisel meets Die Fledermaus. And certainly you did not disappoint. So a question for you both, and David, we'll start with you. What drew you both to this project? What got you excited about coming to opera theater for Fledermaus? Was it the team, the collaborators, the title, the young artists? What got you excited and drew you into this project? David.
Well, it was all of that. I've always wanted to conduct it at Opera Theater St. Louis. I've known about it for years, and I just knew it was a place that I would resonate with. And as far as Strauss is concerned, when I first came here to London, I was a young conductor and I got an agent, and he got me a lot of jobs conducting New Year's Eve concerts. It's a great tradition here to do all Strauss New Year's Eve concerts. And none of the experienced conductors wanted to do them because they would rather be off partying on New Year's Eve. So the new guy got the gigs. So that's how I first conducted the Royal Philharmonic, the Bournemouth Symphony, a lot of other wonderful orchestras here. And in the process, I discovered this wonderful repertoire. The Strauss brothers and their father, Johann Strauss I, were like rock stars in Vienna in the 19th century. And every time a new waltz would come out or a new polka, it was a huge event and people would talk about it. And as I got to know the music, I understood their excitement. And I also understood the great compositional craft that these men had and their sense of humor and their sense of pacing and beauty. So this project is a real thrill for me. And seeing those designs, Shawna, I'm just bowled over.
Thank you for that. Shawna, any thoughts from you about what drew you into this and you're in demand, like David. What got you excited about coming to Opera Theater for this project?
Well, Opera Theater St. Louis is one of the most cherished gems of opera houses in the United States. So of course it had long been on my wish list to join, the wonderful production teams, the administration, and of course, the very famous audiences of St. Louis. I have heard so many tales of what joy it is to make shows at Opera Theater St. Louis in the summer. And I was beyond excited to be invited to bring some laughs to the people of St. Louis. And then when I got the cast list, I thought, good Lord, we're going to be laughing too hard. It might actually be a problem. I hope we're going to have to make sure there's room in the pants of the costumes so people aren't splitting their pants, because we're going to be hopping around, jumping on things, nonsense. I knew hijinks were going to be involved. So it was kind of a sparkling gem of a project, and knowing that with Strauss, you can't go wrong. That music, it's the most fun. I mean, it is champagne.
Well, we have a passion for champagne toasts at Opera Theater, and we will need those laughs. So something tells me we'll see you back under our tent for a toast and for some laughs before too long. But now let's hear a little bit more music. This time we'll hear from baritone Edward Nelson, who was also set to make his Opera Theater debut this season. He was an alumnus of the Adler training program at the San Francisco Opera, and his career is off to a spectacular start with debuts at the Glyndebourne Festival, the Norwegian National Opera, the Washington National Opera, Michigan Opera Theater, and many others. He recorded this very famous and very beautiful tune from his quarantine for us to enjoy. Here is Sing to Love from Die Fledermaus.
Happiness, let us all be friends together for eternity of fraternity, of companions, friends, and lovers. First one kiss, then one more you, and always you kiss me, I'll kiss you, only you, only you, only you.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm not sure if our production would have asked him to play the piano as well, but what a talented performance. And it seems in the break, we've been joined by another superstar guest. I'm so thrilled to have our third panelist with us, who continues to win critical and popular acclaim for her dramatic versatility and musicianship with leading opera companies and orchestras all over the world. Her early career was particularly notable for her Queen of the Night in the Magic Flute, which she sang at, I think, literally every major opera house in the entire world. And then as her career continued to expand in a wide range of roles at major theaters literally around the globe, including at Opera Theater, where she has been no stranger. I think if I have it right, she was with us 5 times: Black River, Don Pasquale, The Pearl Fishers, La Traviata, and Thais. Alas, her return to the Opera Theater stage was not to be this spring. But Mary Dunleavy, welcome. We are so glad you are with us tonight.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much.
Mary, where are you this evening?
I'm in my kitchen in West Orange, New Jersey.
Well, thank you for being here with us at Opera Theater. We're so grateful. So I want to keep the conversation going now, and I want to talk about comedy. Anybody who works in the theater knows that comedy is much harder than tragedy. Comedy's hard, and anybody who says it's easy is lying. There's actually a great quote, actually about you, Shawna, from Broadway World Review, which says that you direct with contemporary flair, dousing classic works with a touch of modern Monty Python and Carol Burnett show moments. So the question to all of you, and Shawna, we'll come back to you, is how do you do that? How do you achieve comedy on stage? Mary, let's start with you. Tell us about comedy and about the moments in Rosalinda that you were planning to seize for comedic effect.
Well, I knew Shawna was going to give me some wonderful things. I had a sneak preview of the set and the costumes and her concept. And in all honesty, once I got the email with the script, I knew we were in for a fun ride. So I was like, well, I'm Jersey, so I don't have to even worry about that. I'm all in for the suburbs, heading into New York City, having a little fun on the side. But in all honesty, I would say a lot of my career roles have been dramatic or tragic, and I have relished the chances I've had to get on stage and be funny because I quite think I'm funny. Joking. But one of my first, I would say a real big success at Opera Theater was the Don Pasquale that we did. And we did that with a director who was a very Broadway heavy director, and we had a lot of fun, a lot of physicality to the role. But I think the thing about comedy is that you can't play the comedy, and it's really important to have an audience. And I knew that Opera Theater was going to be a great audience to play this kind of role to, and that they would feed me things and I would get this kind of great response from them. And, you know, with all the performances we get to do at Opera Theater, I knew that Rosalinda would change and there would be comedy added and, you know, different things would happen. It could have been a really fun and crazy project, I think.
I want to stay on that for one moment, Mary. You mentioned the audience at Opera Theater, and certainly given the intimacy and the thrust of our theater and stage, the audience is almost a character. How do you play differently when you're playing at the Loretto Hilton Center than when you're playing at the Metropolitan Opera House?
That's an excellent question, and it's extremely different. I love the intimacy of the theater at St. Louis, and I mean, sometimes you can literally spot people you know, especially in those seats right down front. I'd be like, oh no, I'm being watched. But I think for me, what happens is I feel that they are very much with me in the moment, and as Maestro and Shawna talked about, this kind of real being an actor in the moment influences your expression of the music. And I find with Opera Theater that every night is different. I feel an energy from the audience. I feel like I'm never hiding. There's no upstage turnaround kind of clear your throat because everybody's all around you. There's no escaping. And I think it really keeps me honest as an actress and as a performer, that you can't let yourself slip for even a second. Like, you have to be moment to moment to moment and stay with you guys, stay with your colleagues, stay with the audience the whole time.
Wow, and I know we've seen that from you. David, I want to ask you, does the orchestra contribute, or how does the orchestra contribute to comedy, and how does tempo and pacing make or break the comedy in a production like Fledermaus?
Well, some of that is done with the orchestration, and Strauss was a brilliant orchestrator. So there might be a blip in the piccolo or in the harp or a mournful phrase in the oboe, which contributes to the mood or the character of the moment on stage. And as like Mary was saying, you have to go with the moment. I mean, as a conductor, you need to feel what's happening with the audience and what's happening with the singer actors on stage. And some nights, you know, maybe the excitement is such that a tempo needs to go a bit faster, or another night you might need to hold a moment and make a pause longer, something like that. And if you all feel it together as a team, then it sort of becomes apparent what to do. You go with the flow. So the orchestra and the music is a living organism, and it changes from night to night to keep the performance fresh. Is that a fair statement, David? Absolutely. Yes, you put it extremely well. And I think that musicians in really great opera orchestras understand that. And they also consider themselves storytellers, just like all the rest of the team does. And that's a joy to work with people like that.
So, Shawna, of course, the heavy lifting is also for the director. What kind of synchronicity and chemistry is necessary for the whole team, director, cast, conductor, to make comedy work? And to build on something that Mary said, how do you know when it's going to work when you don't get to rehearse with an audience in the room most of the time? How do you know you're going to make it funny?
So my personal directing philosophy is my job is to build a spiritual jungle gym. You know, remember from childhood on a playground. I build, you know, it's like, that's my job, is to build that. And then I invite everyone to come in and play. And I have ideas for games, and I have a million jokes ready to go. But I really love it. It's like the best part of the rehearsal process, when we're all playing together and I'm making you laugh and you actually go beyond what I could have imagined and I'm laughing. That's the magic of the rehearsal process. It's a spiritual exchange, because at some point the artists and the conductor and the orchestra, they're all in the jungle gym making the show happen. And my job is to step out of it and let it be the living organism of the people who are making the show. And then you have your incredibly special partner, the audience. And so, yeah, comedy, like you said, is the hardest form. My teachers in Russia, nobody thinks Russians are funny. They get a bad rap. They actually are funny. There are funny Russians. And my Russian teachers always said, you know, anybody can make something tragic, because it's like a gray scale, and you get close enough to it, you hit the mark, you'll get the hearts of the audience. Comedy, it's a bullseye. You either hit it or you don't. And so what I do when I'm directing a comedy is I'm putting it all together and we're having a nice time and we're entertaining each other. I look to the stage managers in the room, and I look to the props crew. I look to the real practical people who are like focused on making sure that the set is safe and that, you know, the artists are safe. If I can get them to laugh, if I catch them off guard, I know we're going to get the audience.
What a great thought. I see a really great question here from Jim Robinson writing in. I know, Mary, that you and Jim have worked together, and I think it was in Viaggio a Rennes at the City Opera, and a great famous production. A question to you, and I wonder if Shawna also wants to weigh in. We're used to asking opera singers about your operatic heroes, the Maria Callas and Renata Tebaldis of yesterday. Do you have comedic heroes and comedic role models? Does Carol Burnett or does Lucille Ball haunt your dreams? Mary, I see you're ready with an answer.
Yes, I mean, I grew up watching them. I watched all the I Love Lucy reruns. I mean, that was my go-to. I have shown my daughter clips on YouTube so she has to understand Lucy. Like, that's a part of her raising. I have to raise her correctly. And then my family watched the Carol Burnett show all the time. And I loved the physical humor, but I also love, and her face, and there's so much happening in those shows. So I have to say that those are probably my, you know, go-to comedy people, and also because they're female, but also I think just because I grew up with them. But I think, you know, I was kind of a ham growing up, and I think I was slightly misunderstood in my family. If my dad and mom are watching right now, I think they thought I was maybe a little crazy, but I think it served me well to just, it's about being a performer as well. And it's not just comedy, but it's being able to go to the depths of their soul for tragedy and going to the outer limits of ridiculous for the comedy.
Absolutely. Shawna, what about you? Any comedic heroes, role models, or inspirations?
Absolutely. I came from a family of jokers, and my mother was the most brilliant comedian I'll ever know. And because she had an attitude which was, you could be upset about something for about 2 minutes, and then we were going to start making fun of it. And it was a great way to grow up, because I learned, what you're saying, Mary, about comedy has to also have heart and come from the depth of kind of your real soul. But it's our own kind of ridiculousness when we get carried away with ourselves that leads to these comedic situations. So luckily I came from a family who believed in being funny and entertaining each other. And then, we were big fans of Fawlty Towers. And of course, Charlie Chaplin, and then more modern comedians that I love, like Key and Peele. And I'm very blessed because my dearest friends have a brilliant puppet theater that is also part of a vaudeville. They also are part of a vaudeville company. And so they're always throwing great comedic resources my way. Like, have you seen this vignette from, 1933? That's hysterical. So, I'm very lucky that we have that conversation ongoing.
It's such an incredible skill, and something we don't always get as much of in the opera house, I think, as we would like. It's part of the challenge of keeping an opera like Die Fledermaus fresh, to keep it funny, no matter when or where you do it. Though, of course, the music is always fresh and thrilling. Before we hear a little more music, I do want to ask about keeping a great classic like this fresh. We talked about that last week, actually, thinking about Carmen. This is another one of the great classics that you have to keep fresh. David, any thoughts about how you keep one of these oft done works fresh, no matter when or how you're doing it?
Well, of course, this would have been performed in Vienna in the 1870s originally, and that audience would have their own context for what was funny to them. And when I was talking with Shawna, we had a raucous dinner in New York a few months ago, talking about that this was going to be in the 1950s in the suburbs of New York, and Orlovsky's party was going to be in Greenwich Village on Halloween. And I got very excited because I thought that is, sort of our context for this piece now. So a lot of it has to do with the setting. And, the rewritten dialogue is so fantastic, too. I think that's going to work very well when this production finally comes to the stage.
Absolutely. Any thoughts, Mary, about keeping one of these great classics fresh?
I think, I would agree with Maestro that I think each time you do it, it has to be brand new. You can't take all the ideas that you've come up with of learning the piece or hearing the piece. It has to really be fresh for you as the artist, so that you don't bring all kind of like the baggage with you, and you really go back to the story, go back to the storytelling, listen to what's being said and what the character's hearing, and that's how you keep it fresh and alive for today and for yourself too.
Oh, absolutely. Mary, I have to point out while we're chatting that we've just received a comment in the chat from someone who says, "Dearest beautiful Mary, who is your favorite sister and who is the funniest person in your family? Love, Kathleen Dunleavy." I wonder if there's a family connection going on here this evening.
Yes, that would be my middle sister, Kathleen. And she and we were in cahoots all the time. And I have an older sister, Trisha, who is also listening, who is, I think, far more serious than Kathleen and I. So Kathleen clearly
Well,
fancies herself a funnier one.
Well, we'll see right now because your sisters and all of us are in for a treat. Up next, we have an aria that requires virtuosic singing and flawless comedic timing. Mary, we're very grateful that you recorded Rosalinda's Bravura aria for us to share this evening, accompanied by Matthew Lobaugh. Everyone, please enjoy Mary Dunleavy singing Rosalinda's Chardash from Die Fledermaus. Brava, brava, what a treat. We wouldn't be quite there yet in the evening had we been at Opera Theater tonight, but what a treat of what we might have heard. Mary, while you're here, I just have to ask, so many of our audience members remember you and your extraordinary performances on Opera Theater's stage. In fact, we've had a lot of questions this evening already about some of your favorite Opera Theater memories. But what I'm curious about, one of your biggest champions while you were here was our late, great artistic director, Colin Graham. I wonder if you could share any notable memories about Colin and the way he impacted you as an artist.
Yes, I loved Colin. He was, Colin was kind of like a god at Opera Theater. He was so handsome and always in his white outfit. And he was kind of had this mystique about him, I think. And when I first came to Opera Theater, I was very young and literally just almost out of school. And so there was a little bit of fear and terror, like, oh, I can't talk to him or approach him or anything. And he was always so kind and open. And, I would see him under the tent and he'd be like, da, da, da. It was always so very casual and lovely. My greatest regret is that we never got to actually do a show together. He never directed me in any of my OTSL performances. But we did collaborate on the Thais because he decided to do the translation himself from the French to the English. And I remember Colin and I had a lot of emails back and forth because French was my best language, and I was very concerned that the Thais contain and keep a hold of that flavor that you can only get in that French language in this piece. And we went back and forth on it many times, but he basically won all the battles, which ended up being the right choice, because I think out of all of the things that I've done there, I think Thais still gets the most comments and has the strongest memories, I think, for fans and for me. It was a very special event, I think, there.
Thank you for sharing those memories. And I have to say, just thinking back to that wonderful recording you just shared and thinking about the comments you all shared before about music, breathing, it must be pretty challenging to record an aria like the Chardash with a recorded piano track in quarantine. Bravo you. That can't have been very easy.
It was not easy. It was challenging, but also fun because there was not a lot else to do. But yes, as David would tell you, as the maestro, that, I kind of think about what would have been in the way of what maestro would have given me and where Rosalinda would be had we all worked together. And because every time you do a production, something new happens. And there's the back and forth, the play, ideas are passed about, right? And so the flavor of the Chardash would have been infused with that particular staging. And of course, I would have been dressed as Catwoman, which is fabulous. And what Meister would have given me. So the challenges, of course, is in your living room, you kind of get what you get. You have the track and you must follow. And it's even with my wonderful friend and colleague, Matthew Lobaugh, it was still a challenge back and forth of like, okay, can we try this? Or, this part feels good, but that's a little fast. And, so there's only so much you can do virtually until we can make music again, which is in a room together and you really feel each other, you sense each other, you breathe together. It's a whole different experience. And I hope we're back to that very soon.
I can only imagine, and it's a useful perspective for all of us across each of these 4 opening night spotlights to appreciate just the extra hurdle that artists have to overcome to share that. Though I think I noticed that your dog was on an easy chair in the background, and your dog may have been enjoying the performance. Had it been my dog, she would have been singing along. But so, you said there's not a lot else to do right now, and I want to pick up on that thread. You're all artists, and artists want to create. When we were chatting before we got started tonight, Shawna said, "I have never been home this long, ever." And I wonder, a question to all of you: how are you feeding and taking care of the artist inside of you while we wait for the all clear to get back to that work? David, let's start with you. How do you nurture that artist right now?
Well, actually, I've been busier than ever. In February, I was appointed music director and principal conductor of the Philly Pops. And we all know what happened in March. So I have not yet done my first concert as music director, but I've been planning the next 2 seasons of concerts with the Philly Pops, and it's a big season. We do 7 subscription series and 11 Christmas concerts every year, and a whole lot of patriotic concerts. And in fact, on July 4th, we are going to be performing. I'm going to Philadelphia, and we're doing a socially distanced orchestra of a patriotic concert on July 4th. And so that's taken a lot of thought and planning. And I'm aware that this year in particular, you can't just do the usual patriotic marches and stuff. I mean, it's a different feeling in the country and in the world. And so, of course, we're including great patriotic songs like God Bless America and things like that. But we're also doing songs like Stand By Me and A Change Is Gonna Come, and things which are really relevant to the moment. So it remains to be seen how we're going to do it technically, with musicians at least 6 feet apart from each other, but it's going to be live streamed. And well, that'll be my first concert in the new job.
Well, we will be tuning in for sure. Shawna, how are you nurturing the artist from your quarantine in New York?
You know, my time in Russia really has blessed me in many ways, not just because I learned how to just not be scared of anything, true. Thank you, Russia. But also because, you know, Stanislavski, he wrote about the artistic process, and he always said, you know, you can't say to yourself as an artist, be creative. Okay, do it. Sit down, be creative. It doesn't work like that, the artistic process, right? It's not like it's not like writing a check or, whatever, going to the grocery store. You have to kind of lay a fertile field and invite inspiration to come to you. And so what I've been doing with myself now is, first of all, slowing down in a way that I have not done in years, and actually remembering and contemplating the blessings that I've had leading up to this moment, the people that I know, the projects I've been lucky enough to work on, and actually thinking about those artistic projects. And then I started really delving into more actually Russian history. I'm reading about Eastern Europe during the Cold War. I know it sounds like a strange way to get creative, but it also was an incredibly difficult time for artists to create during the Cold War. And so it's not exactly comparable, but I take solace and inspiration from how those artists, when they couldn't work, what did they do? It helps me.
That's fascinating. Mary, do you have any thoughts about this question about nourishing your inner artist?
I have to say, it was very hard in the beginning. I had very little desire to sing once I knew officially that we were canceled. Before that, I kept staying hopeful, and I was practicing regularly. And I think what I decided to do just kind of came to me. I was practicing. I warmed up at the piano. It's like, I've got to sing today. And I decided to pull out some old stuff. I just had the desire. I had like a need to sing Lucia, something I will probably never, ever sing again on stage, and probably shouldn't sing again on stage. But it was so, it literally nourished my soul. I loved that role. I felt wonderful singing it. I pulled out everything. I was like Lucia, I pulled out Ophelia, I pulled out stuff from the past. Then I brought out Otello, things I hadn't looked at in a long time. But I said, oh, I should give that another go. And I had so much fun just singing things that didn't have the weight of they must be prepared and you're going to off to a gig. So that is the kind of thing that has helped me, is just singing for me, singing for pleasure, and singing for the future without the pressure of having, it doesn't have to be perfect today. There's no timeline. It's just like, what feels good, what makes you happy, and what can I learn from pulling out something from 1995 and something from today. It's been very enlightening, actually.
That's a nice reminder of the joy of making art and the joy of this work, as opposed to your obligation to sing for a living, and without making light of the incredible challenges from all the work stoppage. That's a beautiful silver lining, to find that joy in singing, and in singing what you love, which actually builds nicely into the first question that I want to share from our audience members. And I'll ask this each of you for a quick response. What are you most excited about doing or resuming after the quarantine comes to an end? And that might be about getting back to the rehearsal room, but it also might be about your favorite restaurant. Shawna, what are you most excited about doing or resuming after this period comes to an end?
I am most excited to go to Vermont and visit my niece and nephew.
What a beautiful thought. Mary, what about you?
Once I know it's safe, I want to go down to Florida, see my mom and dad. My dad's 90. My mom, she won't let me tell you, is 84. So I really need to see them ASAP. And personally, as a mom and virtual schooling, I can't stand it. So if school could just open up tomorrow and I could send her, I've been like, yes.
I can only imagine. David, what about you? What are you looking forward to getting back to?
Well, my husband and I have a house in Provincetown, Massachusetts on Cape Cod, and I'm actually flying there in a little over a week. So, and then I do 2 weeks quarantine, and then I go to Philadelphia. But I'm looking forward to getting on my bike and riding in the dunes.
One of my very favorite places. I'm envious that you will get to go. I can't resist throwing in my own answer. My answer would be, if I could resume anything right now, it would be to see all of you at work. It is 7:59, which means that we would just be taking our seats at this very moment for the start of Fledermaus. What a sadness that we can't be there right now. You absolutely. We can give an upbeat. Please keep the questions coming from our audience. I want to ask a few of these to some of you. We have some really great questions coming in. The first is from someone who asks, the best directors, this patron posits, are those who know when a gimmick or when the gag goes too far. Shawna, what is your thought about that, and that balance between the joke that lands the bullseye and the joke that goes too far?
Now listen, as you mentioned, I'm from Texas. So more is more. Now I know that's not everybody's taste, but I like to double down, and we'll just keep going.
That's a fair answer, and one that I think is only more exciting about what we might have been seeing tonight. Another question, this one for Mary, actually from our wonderful friend Tanny Wolf. Mary, if you could relive any one of your performances, any one night at Opera Theater of St. Louis, which performance, which night would it be?
Oh my gosh, I don't think I can answer that. Wow.
You can give us a few. If you can give us a few, that's okay.
I loved so many. I would pretty much go back. I mean, I would have to admit, I'm going to admit this to you all, the Pearl Fishers, that production was somewhat challenging and not all that much fun. So I probably would skip that. But the Traviata, the Pasquale, and especially the Thais were some of my all-time career highlights. And that's over, gosh, now almost pushing 30 years of singing on the stage. So I think that says something pretty amazing about what can happen at OTSL, what people bring to it and what the audience brings to it. I mean, some of my best nights. And if I could go back and have no allergies and no issues with my voice for all of those performances, that would be the best.
I think you and every other singer who comes to Missouri in June, it's very beautiful, but not always congenial for the voice. David, a number of questions have come through asking about, you mentioned this experience that you had conducting the New Year's Eve concerts and gaining real expertise in this repertoire. This is the can-can meets the Viennese waltz, meets just great vocal writing, meets tunes that we all have been humming our whole lives. I'm paraphrasing a few questions here, but can you tell us a bit more about the style and the music and what makes this music in Fledermaus so great?
Well, it's all based on dance music. The waltz was the rock and roll of the 19th century. It started, at the very beginning of the 19th century, and it was considered very risque. You wouldn't send your daughter to a place where they did the waltz because she'd be whirled around by men, and then she might pass out because she was wearing a corset and she was, she couldn't breathe, and the man might take her into a dark corner somewhere. So it was not respectable until the Congress of Vienna, and then all the aristocrats discovered how much fun it was, and that in 1815 started more than a century of the waltz being the most popular dance in the world. And, we mustn't forget about polkas. There were fast polkas and slow polkas, and they each had their charm. And, the fast polka was athletic, and the slow polka was more, genteel, I guess you would say. And then there's the mazurka, which is a slower dance in triple time like the waltz. So these forms all existed, and all the Strauss brothers took them and created great art out of them. But it was all from popular dance that it arose. So I think if you remember that, then you'll never go wrong in interpreting the music, that it should be danceable.
It certainly makes me want to dance in my seat. One more question that I'm going to throw to Shawna first. How do you think about the outdated gender dynamics in a piece like Fledermaus when you bring it to 2020?
Absolutely. One of the things that I love about the piece is that both Eisenstein and Rosalinda are having similar kind of dalliances, and yet she gets away with it at the end. He gets busted, and she's like, well, no, I guess I forgive you. And I find that to be hysterical. I love taking on classic pieces, and you put like 15% different perspective on it, and it becomes really relevant to our world. All of a sudden, it's not about what was, it's about us. And the Russians are actually fabulous at that because they love their core rep so much. And so it's a way that when you are trained in Russia, that's something you are always thinking about, is this piece that we've loved for 100 years. Why do we still love it? Because we need it today. That music, that Strauss music, it does to my heart what it has done to audiences' hearts for years and years and years. And so you got to just wrestle with the material, and you can make it work, and you can get it to where it's even more exciting and vibrant because it isn't hearkening back to a different time that our audience isn't a part of. It's about us coming together. And there's nothing better than with an audience really, really loving the experience of performance.
What a fantastic answer. We could keep talking and keep talking, but I'm also mindful of our time this evening. We have a little bit more music, but first I want to say thank you to Mary, to Shawna, to David for joining us this evening, to Mary also for your extraordinary performance, and to Josh and Eddie, who I think are watching tonight, for their performances as well. Thank you also to our extraordinary staff at Opera Theater for making all of this happen, particularly Nicole Freber, our Managing Director of Advancement, Damon Bristow, our Director of Artistic Administration, and An Lay, our Director of Marketing and PR. These efforts have been a big lift, and I'm grateful to all of you. And thank you, of course, to you, our audiences. We hope that you are enjoying this digital festival and will continue to join us for other upcoming content starting tomorrow evening. Please tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. for Arts United St. Louis. This is a citywide effort to give back to local working artists. We hope that you will join us to celebrate the artists and art forms that make St. Louis so vibrant. Join us next Sunday as well at 7 p.m. for our opening night spotlight on Awakenings, featuring our artistic director, James Robinson, the composer and librettist, Tobias Picker and Aryeh Lev Stolman, and baritone, Jarrett Porter. If you forgot to order your Sess and Judy's picnic dinner tonight, you can order for June 7th anytime prior to Friday at 4 p.m. And be sure to check out all of our other content, Tent Talks, Front and Center, and a range of other programs that you can find at our website, experienceopera.org/thisisOTSL. I'll ask our panelists to stick around, but before we end, let's just enjoy one more piece of sparkling music from Die Fledermaus to ensure that we all go into the evening with the flavor of champagne in our minds and in our hearts. This, from the spectacular Deanna Breiwick, is Adele's audition aria. Enjoy.
You should see how I do as the shadow shoot them both the pitiful.
Thank you, Deanna. Bravo. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And now we will end in the great tradition of Opera Theater of St. Louis, and especially inspired by Die Fledermaus, we will end with a toast. Please raise a glass, everyone at home, wherever you are, and we toast to opera, to art, to opera theater, to the opera theater family, to health, to all of you, and above all, to champagne. Cheers and be well. We'll see you next week.